Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Starting Small Music Podcast. Today we have Tom Whall with us. How you doing today, Tom?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. So getting right into your story, you grew up in Maryland. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, just in between like DC and Baltimore, kind of right in between in a little town called Silver Spring, suburb called Silver Spring. And my childhood, what was it like? I guess I'd say normal. I just grew up going to school, and only part that probably wasn't normal for everyone is my dad has always been like a garage band kind of musician. So he's always had a band, like a classic rock band. And so yeah, I started playing drums and guitar from a pretty young age, just because he had a room full of instruments down in the basement that we used to go mess around in. But yeah, man, just grew up in Maryland and went to college for drums out in Ohio. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Pretty basic upbringing,
Yeah.
middle of the road.
When I was doing research for the podcast, I thought that we both had a pretty similar stories because I saw your dad played in a classic rock band, and my grandpa played in a country band growing up. And I saw
Oh,
that in an
nice.
interview you talked about like going to the bars kind of as a young kid. And I mean, I remember being way too young, being in like the Legion Post, going to see my grandpa play. What do you
Yeah,
remember about those early days, kind of going to see your dad play?
man. The funniest thing is back then, like I probably started playing drums in like fourth or fifth grade, something like that.
Mhm.
And he played their band probably played. They were called Breakaway, and they probably played like once a month at like a they might play at a pizza place. They might play most of the time it was like a bar and restaurant kind of place.
Mhm.
The thing I remember most is that when I started playing, we would always go, and I'm a triplet actually.
Oh
So
wow.
my brother and sister, my sister used to play piano. We all kind of sang a little bit. But me playing drums, every time we would go see my dad's band play, he would pull me up for like a song or two,
Mhm.
and I absolutely hated it. Like I just could not stand it at all. And I don't know if it was just because like I didn't know the music or whatever, because we would play LaGrange, or like he'd call me up for anything that was like kind of a big drum number for classic rock that I had heard him play a million times, but I wanted to play Blink 182 or whatever I was listening to, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but it was fun, man. I mean, now I'm obviously thankful that he pulled me up all the time, but back then I dreaded it.
Right. Was there any talks of doing like a family band with your siblings and your dad?
I think that would have been a dream of his. We didn't really ever do that. We did sing in church together. And like I said, my sister played piano when we were pretty young, and then when we were in middle school, I did have a band with my sister. My brother was a good singer. He was in like all state boys choir back in, I think it was middle school, and then he kind of fell out of music. And he's a tech guy now in DC. But yeah, my sister and I had a rock band. I think it was called gosh, I haven't thought about this in so long. I think it was called Ancient Hypocrisy
Oh, very
back
cool.
in like seventh grade. It was, well, that's nice of you to say, but it was mostly garbage, I think, back then. But we had fun, man. And my sister would do a thing where she would write lyrics, and she's like a really good artist too. And she would just write words,
Mhm.
and then the band would kind of figure out melodies and the arrangements of the songs and stuff. And then I don't even know if we played any shows or whatever. We might have played a couple of shows, but yeah, the family band dream died, I think, pretty quick. As we got through middle school, we all kind of started to want to do our own thing. I was really the only one who really wanted to do music.
Mhm. Now I saw it was probably in high school that you started writing original material. Was it like from your sister's influence? Because I mean, your dad was playing in a cover band, so what made you want to write your own stuff?
I think I've never really enjoyed learning music like when I was a kid learning how to play drums. I took lessons. I hated lessons because I would have to learn what he told me to learn, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And my teacher was great. He knew that I didn't like that, so he figured out a way to like still make me learn, if that makes any sense. But all I really wanted to do was play drums to like my favorite records and stuff like that. So back then it was, I would like learn every Fallout Boy fill, on their first records, Take This to Your Grave or whatever.
hmm
And I remember hearing like harmony because, like I said, I could sing. So, like when I sang in church with my siblings, I was the one doing harmony just because I heard it better than my siblings. So I kind of like from an early age was curious, I think, about harmony and melody and stuff like that. And then, yeah, at some point early on in high school, my dad taught me like a few guitar chords and picking patterns that he knew, just like classic average patterns. But I would never like learn, especially with guitar. The last thing I wanted to do was like learn something else. Like I never learned any songs on guitar. I didn't learn Wonderwall or Stairway to Heaven or anything. You know what I mean? I just liked playing and making stuff up. I thought that was more fun. So
for
I
sure.
think it kind of came the same way. It just like I've always wanted to hear something that I haven't heard,
Mhm.
um, obviously taking inspiration from things that you do like that you hear, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever learned a song on guitar. Well, until I moved to Nashville, have had a couple like guitar gigs, where I have to learn songs for the gig,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, before that, man, I think it's always just been, I hear something, whether it's something crazy acoustic guitar like Tommy Emmanuel, or whether it's a classic rock tune or a punk tune or whatever. And I might hear something and go, oh, that little thing is cool, and figure out that little motif and then write a whole song that's sort of around that or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Now,
Um,
in high school, what was the decision like that you wanted to like move on to study drums and percussion in college? Like, was it what year do you think that was that you started making that decision?
um, let's see. I guess I probably remember mostly junior year. I think that's when like mostly because that's when would apply to colleges or start that whole process.
Yeah,
Um, and I actually applied for student teaching. I'm very fortunate to have, so in Maryland, they have like, it's such a denser population over there. Like I had three high schools within 10 minutes of my house that I grew up at, and each one was like a graduating class of like 700 kids. So
wow.
it's pretty dense over there. So they figured out, at least, I don't know what they're doing now, but when I was a kid, they were doing something called a consortium, which is like basically I had a homeschool. One of those three schools was my homeschool. And then but if I wanted to go to a different one, I could apply to do that. And each one sort of had a different specialization. So there was like a music and arts one. They basically just had a little more funding for the music and arts program.
Mhm.
Another one was like math and science. And I don't remember what the third one was, but um, so mine was the math and science school, my home school, but the music and art school made sense for me at the time, and it was a newer school. Um, so I got into that school. I applied for it, and actually all three of us, the triplets, got into it and went to. It was called Blake High School, and the music teacher there, you know, was a big influence on my decision. He actually did some graduate work at Baldwin Wallace College, which is where I went,
Yeah,
which is how I found out about that school. But he had encouraged me to do music more on the education side. So I actually applied for music education for college everywhere I went, and then got in, I think, most of the places. And then when I went to Baldwin Wallace to meet the professor there and kind of see the school and everything, We did a lesson. Basically, his name is Josh Ryan up at Baldwin Wallace, and he basically was like, "Hey, I think you're good enough to do performance if you'd want to do performance." And I was like, "Yes, I do not want to teach."
Right.
I did teach a lot of lessons like through college and stuff, like private lessons just for cash or whatever, but um it's never really been the dream, you know.
Yeah. What any specific memories stick out from your time in college, or were you kind of just trying to get it done because you wanted to get on the road?
Man, I didn't really, so I almost transferred to Belmont like halfway through, because another part of, I guess, the childhood would be my dad has always loved Nashville, and he's always loved Chet Atkins and Tommy Emmanuel and some of those classic like fingerstyle guitar pickers.
Yeah.
So there's a Chet Atkins convention here every summer in the middle of the summer. And we used to come down to that every summer, at least through college. I came down with him. So I'd been coming to Nashville in the summers when I was up in Ohio. Um, I didn't really know, I didn't really have a plan, for what I was going to do. I don't think I've ever really thought about things that way. You got to think like I went to the music school was a conservatory, so it was like there was only six percussionists in my graduating class, and most of those guys you end up in the classical world nowadays. You end up being a teacher, or if you're really really lucky, you can get into an orchestra as a percussionist. And I didn't really I knew I kind of didn't want to be a percussionist in orchestra because a lot of those guys uh they're a lot older, especially now and they've been in that chair for 25 years or whatever, and they're not going to leave until they're sort of forced to retire. So those chairs are just and Cleveland's orchestra is one of the top five in the States. So it was a great orchestra. So I know a lot of my buddies were going toward that, but I just didn't find that logical for uh just or practical for what I was good at and also what I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in college, like I kind of I kind of did what I had to do percussion wise. And then my teacher was also like he studied in like Cuba and Ghana and a bunch of places. So we spent my most of my time there focused on jazz and like Afro-Cuban music,
Oh, cool.
which was way more enjoyable to me than learning something on timpani or marimba.
Yeah.
Something that I actually liked, which was playing drums. So but yeah, man, I mean, even then I was still writing songs throughout college, and I was an RA my sophomore year. Probably one of the biggest memories was being an RA and being responsible for a floor of freshmen.
Yeah.
It's probably 30 or so freshmen or whatever, and you have to figure out different ways to socialize the new kids so they can all meet people and get acquainted with college and stuff. And um, I started an open mic night,
Oh,
which
cool.
kind of took off. Yeah, it was kind of funny because I did it for my floor just so they could, people could tell jokes, or you could read a poem, or you could sing a song. You could be goofy. Like, I mean, a lot of the football guys aren't going to get up there and do anything artsy, but they could still get up and do something funny or whatever. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like a real lighthearted thing. And we did it the rest of the time I was there, at least once a month, I think. So it ended up changing. I lived in a house the last couple of years just off campus, and we just moved it to the house and would still do it there. And turned into kind of a big thing after a while, which is fun. In college, everyone getting to step up, and you could be terrible, or you could be pretty good, or you could just want to tell a story or whatever. And in college, everybody needs that, I think. So
Yeah, for sure. Now, out of college, you decided to move to Nashville cold. I hear that you didn't have any like rent plans, anything like that. What's your mindset going into that, and what do those first few days look like in Nashville?
well, yeah, I mean, dude, everybody's different. I don't know how you were with all of those decisions in your life. And I know I've talked to a bunch of buddies that, did it a very different way. I basically moved home. So I graduated like early May in 2011, and then moved home. And there was a buddy that from high school, that we had talked about moving down here together.
Mhm.
And we were home probably 2 weeks. We both were home, and we were just like, we got to get, I mean, our families are great. We're both like, love our families, but we were just like, we have to leave, dude. We got to go now. So we literally threw, like, I had, because I'm a triplet, like I shared a room with my brother growing up. So we threw my 2 twin bed bunk beds that I had grown up in a trailer with a bunch of our stuff, and drove, basically just got in the car and drove down. I mean, I remember stopping at a Wendy's like in Virginia somewhere on the way down and we were calling apartment complexes to figure out if we could like stay there because we didn't have anything,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and we ended up getting a place down right kind of by near the zoo for a 4 month lease. We just signed like a little lease and we're just like, let's just move down for the summer. We'll just, no pressure that way. We can just kind of like get some feelers out, see what the town's like. And that was almost 13 years ago or whatever, 12 years ago. So
Wow. Do
pretty
you
crazy.
pick up gigs on Broadway? What were those first kind of gigs you picked up when you were in town?
Man, I kind of did it differently too. Like I said, I really don't like learning songs.
Yeah.
Like, um, as good as it is for me as a musician, I've just never really enjoyed it. And I definitely have done my share of Broadway things, but it was not the first thing that I did. Let's see, I moved down here, and just to tell you too, my buddy is still down here. He's a booking agent now at New Frontier Touring, which is like they've got a bunch of big acts and stuff. And
Cool.
so anyway, we made it, so to speak. We're still, or at least still paying our rent.
Still going. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, man, when I moved down here, I mean, I had to get a job. You got to think like when I came from a conservatory, I also didn't have I have a ton of playing experience, but I don't have playing experience like Belmont kids do,
Yeah.
where they're in the town and they're seeing, oh, I can go play on Broadway and make money, or oh, I could get picked up by a mid-level artist or a small artist and at least go on the road for a weekend. That was totally, I mean, that was my goal, but that was totally, I didn't know how to get after that path, if that makes any sense. So I got jobs, man. My first job was doing valet at Opryland.
Mhm.
And I probably did that for at least 9 or 10 months, maybe a little more than that. And yeah, just while I was doing that, I was meeting people and going out. Back then, I used to go to, I mean, you have to think, I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. I mean, I wasn't sure if I was going to write songs or do an artist project or be a drummer, or work in the industry, like on the behind a desk sort of side of it. I really didn't have any idea. So I would go to rounds mostly. That was the biggest thing. I'd go to the listening room. I'd go to Hotel Indigo. A bunch of the hotel rounds back then were the big thing. So I would just go and meet people and other songwriters, and sometimes it turned into me showing up and playing cajon for somebody for a round. Sometimes it showed up uh, as me being a third writer in the round, and playing guitar and singing my songs. And, that was kind of the start musically, so to speak, where it was just kind of meeting people. And because I literally knew my one friend that I moved here with who was trying to be a booking agent.
Mhm.
So he got an internship pretty quickly. And he was sort of on his path at that point. Like I said, I've done a lot of things that without planning, that the problem is then you don't really know. You have to make a choice, of kind of where you want to angle your efforts. And um, I didn't really have that, but I did. There's only one other buddy I met from high school, who I'm still super close with as well, who's like one of the top studio players now in Nashville, Alex Wright on keyboards.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so we went to high school together and played jazz back then, and kind of moved down here at the same time. And he's actually who introduced me. So back then, I knew him and Peter, my other friend, and Alex went to Berkeley in Boston. So when he moved down here, there was a huge connection of Berkeley kids who moved down to Nashville. So I kind of became like a Berkeley kid, even though nobody knew I didn't go to Berkeley. So I hung out with a lot of those guys. Actually, my wife and Alex met in Berkeley. He's who I met her through. And um, so yeah, a lot of the Berkeley kids, I got a few opportunities through them just for getting that was probably my first real touring gig was like with an artist named Ayla Brown.
Mhm.
Um, and she's up in Boston now, still putting out music and doing the thing. But back then we did some armed forces tours around the whole world, and some US stuff too for some private corporate tours and stuff like that. But yeah, there's no clean, I don't think there's a clean journey for anyone, man. And it's, for me, like I said, I didn't, not being much of a planner, and at that time not really having any commitment to what I wanted to do or even knowing what was possible, in Nashville. Um, but but yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling.
No, not at all. Now you got to tour with Cassidy Pope, and now you're playing with Jameson Rodgers. How do you end up meeting Jameson?
So I actually auditioned for Jameson. I guess it would be the summer of 2019. But I had kind of known his manager indirectly through a friend. So before I met Jameson, I was guitar teching until I had a more regular gig. I was guitar teching for Rodney Atkins, and yeah, I did that for probably 5 months. And Blake Hubbard is a writer and bass player in town, that at the time was playing for Rodney Atkins, and his best friend is Jameson's manager. So I kind of knew Jameson's manager indirectly, and then Jameson was also working with an MD at the time that I knew. So there was like a couple avenues that threw my name in, at least the hat for the audition. And then, yeah, I think it was like 8 or 9 guys that auditioned, and I don't know why they chose me, but here I am.
Now, in your guys' live show, do you sing harmonies as well?
Yeah, as much as I can, or rather as little as I can, I guess. But yeah, we do a couple medleys through the set. So right now we do an Eagles medley where we all sing, and it's all 4-part harmony, or I guess 5-part harmony. And then we do like a band medley where each band member kind of does like a verse and chorus of a song. And so I get to sing a little bit, and then I sing a little bit here and there for some other harmonies. But it's a little tougher on drums to be able to go full volume when I'm out of breath most of the time anyway, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. Now, getting more into your songwriting too. In 2021, you signed with Combustion Music, all-star lineup over there. What's it like to write at a great place like Combustion?
Man, that's another thing. Yeah, I mean, it's great. Like, I've been there just over a year now, or is that right? Yeah, just over a year. And it's been great. I mean, the team is it's a smaller group of people that are just on fire. And whether you're talking about the track guy producers or the writers or the pitchers or whoever, everybody doing everything, it's a very communicative group. And they've been nothing but supportive. It's kind of the same way with drumming. I feel like I've been writing forever and growing in that way. And my writing story, I kept writing since I moved to Nashville, but I didn't necessarily want to like be a quote unquote Nashville songwriter where you're in 4 or 5 days a week just cranking out songs.
Yeah.
So I pushed away from that pretty early on. Also just didn't have the time for that commitment, trying to play drums on the road and stuff. But I did grab on to people, and I have been co-writing, since I moved here.
Yeah.
But once COVID happened, my wife is a great artist and songwriter in town, and she pulled me into a bunch of stuff at that point. And I'd been getting into the production stuff, and basically, I mean, it got to a point where even when I started with JMO in 2019, I was bringing my tracks rig out on the road and working on demos and stuff, totally separate from Jameson, obviously. But I think yeah, I think it just transpired into a really cool partnership. Knowing that I'm out on the road with JMO and we do write on the road together, I think it made sense to kind of keep things sort of close in house, because Jameson also writes with Combustion.
Mhm.
So it just made sense for me to be there. And that once we had a few meetings about possibilities and goals, and it just sort of all clicked. And I'm just thankful that they've allowed me to grow and invest in me, and hopefully it pays off for both of us. So
For sure.
yeah.
Now, I like to close all my interviews by asking, what's a piece of advice that you've learned along your way, especially you working in so many different avenues of the industry? What's a piece of advice you would give to a younger musician out there?
Well, I think the best piece of advice would be to keep charging ahead, and I mean that, I guess, in from two opposite sides of the same coin. Like, you've got someone like me who tends to be not a planner, and I like to start walking out the door, and then as I see sort of like sidewalk pieces start to take place, I can then guide whichever I think I'm going to like the most, or whichever way makes the most sense to me.
Mhm.
That's how I've always done everything. But I also understand that's not really for everyone either. Some people come from the opposite side of the coin, where it's like they like to have a few options and then go forward once you can see a little bit more ahead of you. I think that's pretty tough in the music industry, and I think the important thing is just taking steps forward. Like, I mean, I've released music as an artist in the past that I don't necessarily connect to now, but I don't regret doing that, or I wouldn't take that back. Um, just because of where I'm at now. But yeah, I think you just have to keep pushing forward and trust that, and keep trying to grow. My biggest thing with Combustion that, I talk to them a lot about as a writer, because it's very easy to see as a writer. You're turning in songs every week, so you can listen to songs a month ago and that you wrote a month ago, and say, man, that wasn't as good as I thought it was when we wrote it,
Mhm.
or it's different in some way. And I think when uh a big fear I've always had is plateauing at different points, whether it's drumming or writing or whatever, because you can't help but plateau at some points. You might get a gig and then feel like every show is great, and you're just getting better and learning more about the industry, and learning more about how artists work and how management teams work, or whatever it is. And there's always a point where it feels like you're kind of flattening out for a little while, and you can't avoid those. But the more you can kind of be ready for them, the shorter time period they'll be, if that makes sense.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.